Okay, today I'm going to be discussing how game engines are made. Now, I'm going to be largely basing this off of the Hazel series on YouTube, which again is just a really great system, or I guess, sorry, playlist that really goes into depth on how game engines are actually made because they're very, very complex, and I'm just kind of going to go over the basics of it because I don't see that being covered very much. Obviously, there's tutorials that go a lot more in depth into specific parts and things like that, but how do you actually like go about designing this sort of game engine? How do you go sort of about like planning it and whatnot? Because that is something that I see is very, it's not very covered. It's like there's covering a lot of different steps and stuff and a lot of different, you know, systems that you really need to have in place to create a game engine. But again, I'm just going to cover how do you actually kind of go about trying to design a game engine. Now, first of all, obviously the very first thing you have to make is an actual, well, renderer, because obviously you don't have to do this from most game engines tend to do it from scratch or with something such as like OpenGL or Vulkan, this sort of thing. The very first thing you need to plan out and actually decide which is an actual graphics library behind what is going to power it, because unless you want to make graphics from scratch, I would say good luck with that. But here is, I would highly recommend Vulkan or OpenGL if you haven't learned any. This is from the same company, Chrono, I believe. Yep. Um, very good libraries and stuff for creating this kind of thing. And anyways, the next thing you have to kind of decide for making an engine is like, and obviously, I guess this isn't really in order, but I guess because a lot of these could be added in any other order or like in whatever order you want, which again makes it kind of a little bit more confusing. And obviously, this is just scratching the surface right here with the graphics, because then you could also add stuff like 3D or two if you want it to just be 2D. Obviously, you're going to start off with 2D and then expand later to 3D. This is typically how game engines go. If you want to make it more 3D, you'd go from 2D, then 3D, and then you might focus on something like, well, actually, these are in no particular order. Technically, you could kind of do them any way you want. It's just the order in which you make them work together, um, depending on how you do that, would make it easier or harder. So, again, something such as multiplayer is probably going to be easier if you do it sooner. But again, it doesn't really matter as long as it'll just mean it. All it means is that the longer you wait to do a certain part of the engine, the harder it is going to be to make it work with everything else. So obviously, if you wait to do multiplayer last, it's going to be very complicated. But if you do it first, it won't be as complicated, and you can like integrate it a lot easier and faster. Then we've got stuff like entity component system, which is just, a way for like managing memory and how do you actually store it within your game engine. How do you store all this information and kind of like package it down and are able to stuff like saving and loading, this sort of thing. Again, there are so many different layers to each of these different topics. I'm just brushing the very surface of them. But again, there's a lot of tutorials that actually go way more in depth into this. I'm just going over the basics of like these different systems and then how to actually kind of try and plan this out. Because again, planning out a game engine is not very easy. Next thing, obviously, you've got stuff like physics. A lot of game engines tend to do physics. Obviously, 2D physics is like pretty simple, not too complicated, and then you try to do 3D physics, and good luck, because even the best engines, such as like Unity, their physics are not always perfect. Next thing we have, again, this is probably something you'd actually do way sooner than the order I'm mentioning it in, but IMGUI, this is just a tool. Again, this isn't like specific to, like, you don't have to use IMGUI, there's a lot of other tools out there, but this is just the best, like, well-known example of basically anything UI, like, for creating game engines. A lot of, as you can see, I think down here, they have some examples of a lot of um, more basic game engines that have used IMGUI to be able to create really complex stuff. Because then you obviously want all the UI to be able to be used by the user to create all this stuff. And on top of all this, you're also going to want stuff like a programming language, which again, Lua is just kind of the standard because it's this is a type of programming language that you can, code once and then kind of run at a lot of different places. And it's typically used for a lot of modding. But again, this is like modding a game engine. So programming within a game engine is like modding that own game engine. Or I guess not really the engine, it's more modding the game that you're making. Actually, that doesn't make any sense at all. Just trust me on this one, but again, Lua is a type of programming that you're going to use a lot for this type of in-game engine programming. So how do you like really tie all of this together? Like these are a lot of really complex systems, and like how do you actually make them work together, Because again, this is what makes up the basis of a game engine. And really there's no like straightforward path on how to do this. So I find that the best way to do this is to break them down in different parts. So break your engine down into all these different parts that you want to have. Obviously, you don't have to be a multiplayer game, but something you probably will have to do is graphics. So again, starting from like learning graphics is like a really good start. If you want to do 3D, again, another thing you should expand on. But if not, I think the most important ones are, something like IamGUI, which is like all the, stuff on screen that you're able to add, and then the actual like graphics behind it, along with the programming, a programming language, so you can, make stuff on top of this engine. So again, these are like the top 3 things, or top like first 3 things I would try and learn if you're trying to make your own game engine. But again, you have to kind of learn these separately, and then once you've learned them enough, then you can once you've learned it, you can kind of remake. So if you make, let's say for instance, like you use OpenGL to draw like a square on the screen or whatever, and you do that through a whole tutorial and whatnot, like that is great. You're like progressing through a lot of things, but now when you go to actually create the engine, you might want to plan out, be like, okay, here I want to have OpenGL, I want to have, IamGUI, I want to use this as well, and I want to use Lua or whatever. So we're just making a really basic engine. But then when you go to do that, you want to basically recreate that square thing. So you're going to kind of do this whole process over again, because you've learned it now, but now you actually have to create it from scratch and try and make a more like performance and optimized one. And obviously, again, when you get to the actual programming, I would try and split things into different files. So when you go to plan a game engine, this is what I would recommend: taking the renderer and kind of breaking the renderer down. So on one side, you're going to have like the graphics pipeline. On one, you're going to have like a window like class or file, I guess. So you'll have like a window file, you might have like a camera if you're doing 3D, and then just kind of just plan out all these classes and then roughly write down, what is going to happen within the class. Obviously, you can't do this for literally everything. I'm going to pull up my project in a second here. But obviously, you can't do literally everything within a, you know, within a file. So what I have done, and again, this isn't working currently because I'm still working on the Vulkan renderer for my game engine, but again, I've split it into these different files. So we have, we've got the renderer itself, we've got the network, and we've got the engine. So these are, again, the different parts of the engine, but I've also broken them down into something like debug. And again, the actual code is like down here, but what I've done is I planned out what I want this actual class is to do. And obviously you can't plan every single class. I've realized this from trying to do this, but you can't plan literally every single class you want to have within your engine, because that's just way too much to plan, and it's, it slows you from actually like making progress on the engine. So I highly recommend making kind of a, this little comment here on the top of like, what is this class, or namespace or whatever that you want to create, and then kind of define, what's the point of this class, and then also like what are all the functions that you want to have access to, because obviously a lot of this stuff is going to be all of these functions are going to be open to whoever the user is that's actually using it and being able to create stuff. And again, there's lots of like smaller stuff, like, oh, if you want to have a file system, like save and move different files, you're going to have a class for this, which again, you can't really plan for ahead of time, but you just have to like take these really big systems and kind of break them down into like oh, how do I want to be able to, save file? Like if I'm just I'm creating a game and I want to be able to save files. Well, obviously, you're going to need some kind of, you know, file system to be able to do that and save it. And also you might want to have like a better storage system to make it more efficient. And so you start adding like ECS and all this other complicated stuff that again, focus on the simple things. So get a renderer, get a IMGUI, or any UI, I guess, showing on screen. Which again, technically, you don't even have to do this. You could just use OpenGL to do all your UI. But I would highly recommend starting off with IMGUI because it allows you to create the UI way faster and actually get stuff up on the screen rather than spending a ton of time trying to like draw text to the screen and make buttons and all this other stuff that you really don't need to be doing early on. So use but again, eventually you could swap out IMGUI for your own, UI system. And that is about all I have for today. Keep it simple. Basically, you have to think about this as an engineer. Break down the big problems into a lot of very small problems, and then try to plan as best you can. Obviously, you can't plan for everything, but be able to adapt and adjust and learn from your mistakes. So basically, keep creating, keep coding, and subscribe.